Hi and welcome to Snarky and Modern's Lit Embroidery Stitch Along. Let's get started by talking about pattern stuff. First, you'll need to download the pattern from the group and save it to your device to print. The pattern will have 2 pages, which will include a diagram and then a separate page with the pattern that you can use to transfer onto your fabric. You'll need to cut along the edges of the 3x7-inch bookmarker design for our tracing prep. And then once you'll do that, you'll be ready to chat about fabric with me. I'm going to be working with Hemingway from the Fernway Studios curated fabric collection for the stitch along. This hand-dyed Kona cotton came to me pre-cut in about 12 inches by 24 inches in length. If you are also working with fabric from Fernway Studio, I recommend cutting it into 4.5-inch wide sections. This will give you plenty of room along the edges to turn these into bookmarkers once we're done stitching. If you do not have fabric from Fernway, you'll need fabric sections that are about 8 inches by 4.5-inch pieces for each bookmarker design. And there'll be 5 total once we're done with the stitch along. Be sure to use a fabric-friendly pin when marking your fabric. In this video, I'm using my heat erasable pins to mark out the sections to trace. Once your fabric is cut, tape your pattern to the back side of your fabric. Stitching tip, be sure to tape to the side that you do not want to stitch on, so prettier side should be visible on top. I'm going to be centering my design in the middle of my fabric here and then taping along the edges with masking tape so it stays in place as I trace. To keep things simple, I am tracing using a window in my house. You can also trace directly from your device's screen, or you can trace using a light box as well. I have also found that a homemade light box can be made using your phone's flashlight and Tupperware or glassware. To trace, I'm going to be using, again, my heat erasable pins from Amazon. I'll be sure to link those in the post. I also recommend friction fabric pins to trace with as well. And if you choose to use pencil, just be sure to keep your markings extremely light or be very mindful to cover them with stitches because they will not wash out. If the design lines are too faint, you can always trace them with a marker before taping them to your fabric. Once your pattern is traced, choose your hoop to stitch with. I have a 6-inch and 4-inch hoop here. If you stitch with a larger hoop like the 6-inch, you may need a stabilizer to be able to pull your fabric completely tight inside your hoop. A tearaway or a cutaway stabilizer would work, and I'll be sure to link those as well. Using a smaller hoop will help your fabric remain tight, but you will have to move the hoop as you stitch. There are 2 ways you can hoop your fabric. The first is shown here, placing the smaller hoop down first, fabric, and the larger hoop on top, using the screw or key at the top to tighten the hoop, pulling gently around the edges of the fabric to make sure it's tight like a drum. Repeat until you see no wrinkles in your fabric, and again, you can gently drum your fabrics on the fabric on top to show how tight it is. The second way is to place the larger hoop down first, followed by your fabric, and then the smaller hoop on top. Again, using the key or screw at the top to tighten the hoop, gently tugging the fabric's edges along the side as you do. Hooping this way can help protect your fabric and its edges from the grime and oils of your hands as you stitch. It can also be really helpful to hoop your fabric this way in your hoop and then trace as well, because then your fabric is tight as you trace especially from your device's screen. Once your fabric is hooped, you'll be ready to follow along our stitch along. Stay tuned and be checking the group every other Monday for updates for our embroidery stitch along. We'll be starting out with our romance design featured here in this video, and then following we will have our classics, fantasy, horror/thriller, and then our sci-fi designs as well. Happy stitching!